What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk about how to get blurred backgrounds in your photos and videos no matter what kind of camera, lens, phone, you name it. We're going to talk about how to do it. Let's get into it. Before we actually get into today's video, if there's any part of this video that you like, I'd greatly appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe down below. Liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing actually does help, and I greatly appreciate it. Now, without further ado, let's actually get into talking about how to get blurry backgrounds in your photos and videos. Tip number one for getting blurry backgrounds is going to be getting a lens that has a low aperture. Lenses that have low apertures produce blurry backgrounds. It's called having a shallow depth of field. The lower your aperture, the more shallow depth of field you're going to have, meaning the more blurred your background is going to be. One of the cheaper options for getting a lens with a low aperture would be to get a prime lens. You can find prime lenses like this 50mm f1.8 or this 24mm Cine t1.5, and they are a lot more affordable than lenses like these, which would be zoom lenses. This is a 24-70 G Master f2.8, and this is a 70-200 G Master f2.8. And the price between these different style of lenses are dramatic. You could probably pick up a 50mm f1.8 depending on what platform you're shooting on, from anywhere from $100 to $250. And the G Masters go for a lot more money because they are zoom lenses, but they are capable of shooting at f2.8, which do give you really good blurred backgrounds. Tip number two is going to be proximity. Now, all lenses, including the one on your phone, have what's called a minimal focal distance. If you put your subject in the minimal focal distance of your lens, everything behind it is going to be blurred out. The key to this is to get the subject that you're trying to shoot as close to your lens as possible while keeping it in focus. Anything behind your subject is going to be out of focus because it is going to be out of your focal distance range. Sometimes you might need to separate your subject from the background a little more to get a little bit more distance and get your background out of that focal distance range. But keeping your subject as close to the lens as possible, even with something like your iPhone, will keep everything behind it blurry and out of focus. If I hold my 50mm lens as close to the lens as possible, you can see that everything behind it is out of focus. You can see my hand here on the side is blurry. That is because the 50mm is at the minimal focal distance range, and everything behind it isn't within that focal distance range, so it's going to be blurred out. Now, I'm actually filming on a wide angle lens that has an f4 aperture. I don't have a very low aperture, but as you guys just saw, I was able to keep the background blurry by keeping my lens in the minimal focal distance range. And before I forget, there are options that you can do with your phone. There's apps you can download that will allow you to have blurry backgrounds. I personally have an iPhone 12 Pro, and the mode that allows me to get a nice blurred background would be portrait mode. But if I don't feel like using portrait mode, then leaving my subject in the minimal focal distance range will still give me that blurred background. Tip number three, and the final tip for this video, is going to be what's called compression. Now, when you zoom into a subject, the background does this weird kind of warping effect where it compresses the background. Now, if I was to take a frame on this wide angle lens, and let's say I had my face right about here in the frame, you can see a lot of the background behind me. It's clearly visible. But if I was to come all the way back here and take my lens and zoom in, now you can't see as much of the background. Now with this lens, because I don't get that much of a zoom range, it's a 16-35, it doesn't really show that drastic of an effect. But if I was to switch over to something like my 70-200 lens, now you can see my background is much more compressed. This is probably a horrible example because I'm very close to the background, but I'm gonna put some B-roll in that is a much better example of how to properly use compression, because I should be much further away from my background than I am. Now, the good thing about compression is you don't need a crazy expensive lens like my 70-200 G Master, but anything that can zoom probably more than 50 will give you a little bit of that compression style and blurred background. An example of that will be this 28-70mm kit lens from Sony, as well as this Sony 85mm f1.8. Now, this is kind of the best of both worlds, and I actually really love this lens because it not only has a higher focal length, which would be the 85mm, but it also has an f1.8 aperture, so it gives me an even blurrier background. So those are some more cost-effective options. You can do it with any kind of zoom lens that goes preferably above 50 or above like 70, or like just at 70 will give you that nice compression look. So that's gonna be it for today's video. I hope you guys found it helpful. I hope you guys are able to get those nice blurry background in your photos and videos. If you have any questions about any of the information that I mentioned, let me know in the comments below. I am more than happy to answer them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.